Hello, hello. Hope everyone's feeling fed and watered and coffeed and fruit and all the rest that was out there. It was a good morning tea. Delighted to introduce you guys to Hayley Stewart. She's going to talk to us today, but first let me give you a bit of her background. Hayley is a developer and educator and has been teaching others to code for as long as she's been coding herself. She's a firm believer that anyone can learn to code, and proves it by dedicating a lot of her working and personal life to helping improve diversity in the tech industry. She has extensive experience in writing resources and teaching workshops about computer science and programming for all ages and experience levels. Hayley currently works at Envato, where she trains apprentice developers and prepares them for joining their first team as a fully fledged developer. So if our friends here would like to take their seats, I will hand over to you, Hayley. Take it away.
Okay, good morning everybody. Haere mai, ata mārie, kia ora koutou. So that's welcome, good morning, hello. My name is Hayley, and FYI, my pronouns are she, her, and today I'm going to be speaking on the topic of paying it forward. So if you didn't read the blurb and you just thought, oh, what a cool title, I'll go to this one, or I'm standing next to this room, I'll just walk in. Today I am going to be presenting on how do you continue to progress and develop and upskill in your own career, while at the same time dedicating time to helping others do the same, who may be at a lower experience level than yourselves. Because this is what I've been doing for most of my career. So I'm going to go into that in a moment, but before we do go any further, I would really like for us to just pause and to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land which we are gathered on today. So today in this room, we're standing on Whadjuk Noongar Boodja, and I want to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here and online today, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. The hundreds of Indigenous groups who continue to exist in this land have never ceded their sovereignty. And I want to acknowledge not just that I happen to be standing on Whadjuk land, but that we are all standing on Indigenous land. But you can probably hear in my accent that I did not grow up here. I'm from the Manawatu, back home in Aotearoa, so I'd also like to acknowledge the heritage of the land in which I grew up and pay respects to the iwi that have lived and do still live on that land. And I'd encourage you to just take this moment to also consider the people of the culture and the culture of the land that you grew up on also. I'd also love to give a shout out to all of our sponsors, and also they're not on this slide, but I'm also going to give a shout out to She Codes, who are running a coding workshop today. So if you have a moment, I totally encourage you to drop in and see what's going on there, because it should be lots of fun. But what are we talking about today in this room? So I want to talk to you a little bit about my career journey, because it's not probably the most typical career journey you would take to become a developer. And then from there, we're going to go into how did all the teaching and mentoring that I've done help me to become a better developer? And from that, what are the tips and tricks that I've learned to help you become an effective teacher or mentor while you're also working as a dev or just in tech in general? And how does all of this come together to help us improve the diversity in our industry? So let me tell you a little bit about my career and where I am today. So at the moment, I am a senior engineer and developer mentor at Envato. Has anybody heard of Envato? Yeah, we've got shocking brand recognition. We're trying to do something about it. But basically, we sell, we provide stock footage or photos or fonts or presentations. We basically create and sell creative stock. So even if you haven't heard of us, you have definitely seen us being used. And we support thousands of authors around the world who might be photographers or make really cool animations and whatnot, and we sell what they create on our platforms. And so far we have paid millions and millions of dollars towards authors, and we have supported thousands and thousands of creators. So we are big on community, which is probably why I work there, because their values align really closely to mine. But also I work there because I have a really cool job. So I am a developer mentor, which means that we hire apprentice developers, and they get to spend 9 months with me or another developer mentor, just training and learning how to become an effective developer on a delivery team at Envato. And then they get hired into a team at Envato of their choice, and then we take 2 new apprentices, and they get to hang out with the developer mentor and do the same. And this program has existed at Envato for about 5 years now. and I just joined about 6 months ago to help grow the program. So we're going to circle back to that in a little bit. So my career journey. I have been in tech for about 9 years, which I think is really impressive because I'm only 25. And so in that 9 years, I have had the same goals for basically the whole time. One of them was I wanted to feel confident in my role as a developer. I got into tech when I was 16, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I definitely knew that I didn't know what I was doing. And so I've spent a lot of my career just wanting one day to feel confident and like I do know what I'm doing. And I think it's only like maybe 6 months ago when I joined Envato that I finally started to actually feel confident in that, yeah, I am actually a developer. But the other goal that I've had in my career is I want and have done a lot of work towards helping other women to get into our industry in technical roles in particular. And the reason that I've had this goal is because every time I joined a dev team or worked at a tech company, I would love it. I would have so much fun being a developer. But over time, I would just get more and more bitter about how many men are on my team and how few women are on the team. And so I would then bounce back to working in education. So I've spent about half of my career in education, half of my career in tech. And I don't mean that I went and got a degree in teaching and I taught in schools. That's not what I did. I've worked with companies like SheCodes to just mentor other women in tech of various ages, and not just at SheCodes, through various organizations. And so through that, I have mentored people who are like 5 years old, all the way up to people who are very near retirement age. So I have a lot of experience in teaching people about tech and helping people find roles in the tech industry. But this created a bit of a different kind of problem for me, and that was I've bounced between education and tech so much that I started feeling like I don't know how to build my own technical skills while I'm spending so much time focused on teaching fundamentals. Because I've spent so much time teaching people up until their first role in tech, and I haven't spent any time teaching, devs who have been in the industry for like 15 years. That's just not what I do. And so throughout my career, I've had moments of imposter syndrome creep in because I think, oh, I've spent too long in education and I'm starting to not understand what my dev friends are talking about, so now I'm feeling behind, and I'd have a small panic and then I'd go back in tech. But then I'd be in tech and think, oh, there's so many dudes here and there's no women, so then I'd go back to education. And the cycle just repeated itself. So part of this was because I was feeling like, oh, I'm spending so much time teaching and I'm not really spending time working on my skills. And I had this perception that in order to become a better engineer and in order to improve my engineering skills, I had to spend a lot of time doing what I called engineering things. So for me, that was programming. And I think this makes sense. Like the more time you spend programming, probably you're going to get better at it, and so your engineering skills are going to improve. But I realized that this is quite a narrow-minded approach to being an engineer. And so I've adapted this over the last few months from my role at Envato. I've realized that this is actually what it is to improve your skills in engineering. You've got to spend a little bit of time teaching, you've got to spend a little bit of time programming, but if you want to really rapidly improve your own skills, you've got to spend a lot of time programming and teaching. You can't just do one and expect your skills to improve. And the reason that I think I've had this realization over the last 6 months is because when I was hired at Envato, I went through the interview process to be a developer mentor, but to fit into their structure of, well, how do we pay you and how do we compare you to other people, they gave me the role senior engineer. And I was so scared because I have never taken on a role that had senior in the front of it before. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't been a dev for actually that long. I don't know what I'm doing. Why did they call me a senior? They're going to find me out. I'm going to be demoted. I'm going to be fired. Like all the imposters just came everywhere. But as soon as I started, I realized that my career in education had prepared me so well into stepping into the role of senior engineer. And I notice it in the other engineers that I work with, and I notice it in all the engineers I interact with through mentoring other programs and also through just being on other dev teams in the past. And I've realized that the engineers who have dedicated more of their career towards teaching or mentoring or generally helping somebody else in their team are the better engineers, which shouldn't sound too shocking, but this was quite a realization that I had. So I want to unpack this a little bit, and I want us to have a little chat about how did teaching actually help me to be a better developer, and therefore how can it actually help you to be a better developer. And I'm just going to interject here. Like I said in my blurb, I'm going to use a lot of examples about engineering, but this could apply, as far as I'm concerned, to anyone in any industry doing any kind of job. Just my experiences in engineering, so that's what I'm going to roll with. So how did teaching help me to be a better dev? I have learned that you end up with a much deeper understanding of a concept if you are bracing yourself for someone to ask you why. So if you know that you're going to learn something and next week someone's going to say, oh, why did you do that? Why did you use that? Why did you put it in that context? What would you use instead? When you know that you're going to be asked this just absolute massive pile of questions, you end up preparing for it. So when I go and learn a new concept, I don't just learn the thing and then implement it. I learn the thing. I learn what alternatives I could use instead. I learn where else I could implement this thing. I learn what the trade-offs are of this thing, and then I go ahead and actually use it. And it means that the next week when someone asks me why I did that, like I'm braced for the answer. Like I know what I want to say. And that's entirely because the more junior someone is in their career as an engineer, the harder their questions are, and the more intense the questions are, and the more they just start to absolutely grill you. I've found with the more senior someone is in their career, the more, if I give a confident answer, they're just going to go, yeah, okay, and they just roll with it. Whereas a junior's going to be like, that's not good enough, I need more. And so you end up having to understand something way deeper than you would otherwise. Hopefully this one's obvious, but it really helps with communication skills. Because I cannot tell you the number of times in my career I have taught someone what a for loop is. And that doesn't sound hard, but trust me, I know this from experience. When you first start learning to code, for loops are like mind-blowing. They're absolutely magical to, I'd say, 90% of the people learning them. And I'd say 50% of the people learning them do not understand the way that I've explained it the first time. And it doesn't matter which way I pick to explain it, they're not going to get it. They need to hear it a few different ways. And so through the process of teaching somebody else a particular skill, you end up explaining that same thing over and over again, but in different ways every single time. And it ends up building up to really good practice for your communication skills. So now when I'm working on a dev team and I try and explain something to somebody else, I know that I'm probably going to be able to explain it really well first time, and they're going to actually understand what I'm saying. And that's all from just practice of teaching people who ask me questions of why, but how does that work? I don't understand. It's just from practice of dealing with that for so long. It's also helped me in that I've learned that I really have to walk the walk and actually do what I tell my apprentices or my juniors or whoever. I have to do what I tell them to do. So I tell the apprentices that I work at Envato at the moment, I tell them all the time, just ask questions. Just ask the question. If you don't know something, just ask the question. But then I found that I would have a question and I would open our engineering Slack channel and think, oh, there's 150 engineers in here. I don't want to ask the question because I'm going to feel stupid and someone's going to roll their eyes like, why you ask? But I just realized, you know what, I would tell my apprentices to post this question, so I'm just going to post the question. And no one has ever messaged me saying, lol, 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 that was a dumb question. Like, that doesn't happen. What usually happens is someone says, oh, I'm following this thread because I also don't know the answer to this question. So it's really helped me to get over my fear of asking questions. Like, I just do it because I tell them to, so I should probably do the same. It's also really helped me with imposter syndrome, which is what I mentioned at the start of my talk. This is why I feel like I finally feel confident as a developer, because I've had to coach so many other people through imposter syndrome, particularly because most of my career has been focused on helping women get into tech in particular, and we're atrocious for imposter syndrome. So coaching other people through that so often, I finally started internalizing it to myself. And my internal monologue has changed from, oh, what if they find out I'm not really a senior and I don't know what I'm doing, to, they hired me as a senior, so I mustn't be. So I'll just call myself one of those now. And so the internal monologue, it's totally different now, and imposter syndrome is not really something that I struggle with anymore, except before this talk, when I was starting to freak out of, oh, what if no one comes? So thank you so much for coming. Okay. I've also become way more forgiving of my own knowledge gaps. Because when you first start teaching or mentoring someone else, especially if you're doing this, like if you're giving a presentation or a workshop or something, I feel like your biggest fear is someone's gonna ask me a question and I'm gonna have to Google it in front of everybody. And that's really scary, because what if you can't figure it out and then you get all flustered? But now I've learned that actually when someone asks me something and I don't know the answer, which realistically is most of the time, I now just go, cool, this is now an exercise in learning how to Google things together. So we're going to go and do this research and see if we can figure it out together. And this literally happened a couple weeks ago. The apprentices were so obsessed with trying to figure out how to use this hook in React, and I haven't used React in like 18 months, so I didn't know how to do it. So we spent 2 hours Googling, trying to implement it, didn't even figure it out in the end, but I feel like they forgot that we were trying to make it work, so it kind of ended up okay. So I've become way more forgiving of my own knowledge gaps. When they asked me that question and I thought, I don't know how to do this, it just became an exercise in let's unpack this together and see if we can work it out together. And while the slide's on, I'm gonna chuck out a dangerous word there where I feel like a lot of people, they go the other way. So instead of being scared of your knowledge gaps and being scared of asked a question, you got way too much confidence and that mansplainer comes out in you. So you think, I don't know the answer, but I'm not going to show them. So I'm going to talk with confidence about something completely irrelevant, and then they won't notice, which is not true, and it is not helpful. So I've become more comfortable with my own knowledge gaps. I don't think I've been a mansplainer, but I don't think I have, or a womansplainer if you like, but I certainly would never do it now because I'm okay with just saying, let's just Google it and let's just figure this out. Or just, I don't know, let's go ask someone else. So with that in mind, I want to talk about how can you be an effective mentor? Because clearly these skills are helpful. Like I feel like I'm a pretty decent engineer, and it's because I've spent so much time teaching other people. So let's unpack what do I actually do that's made me a good teacher and therefore helped me with those skills. And hopefully therefore you can go back to work and feel like you can be a good mentor as well. So something I would like to point out is that simply having knowledge does not make you a good teacher. And I actually put this in the slides because a couple weeks ago, I was showing these slides to the apprentices and I said, hey, could you give me some ideas? What do you think I should mention in here? And one of them instantly rolled her eyes in the most dramatic fashion I have ever seen and said, oh, I hate it when you meet those engineers and they've been in tech for like 15 years and so they think that they can teach and they can't. And clearly this person has been burned. And I think we all have. I think everybody can probably think about that person that they've interacted with who clearly thinks they are the absolute bee's knees because they know everything about this one particular topic, but they could not explain it to you to save their life. But they have the confidence to think they can. So I would like to point out that having knowledge does not make you a good teacher, which leads me to this dumb expression. Those who can't do, teach. This is such an embarrassing excuse. This is what I like to say instead. Those who know, do. Those that understand, teach. It is one thing to know about a particular concept or library or whatever. It is another thing to have the understanding and have the skills to actually teach it to somebody else. These are not the same thing. And I get so angry when people say those who can't do teach because I'm a teacher and I know what I'm doing and I have a pretty good understanding usually of the things that I'm teaching because I've got that deeper understanding because I was prepared for that really terrifying why did you do that question. So those who know, do. Those who understand can also teach. So with that in mind, how do you become an effective mentor? So maybe you have all the knowledge, but how do you actually have enough understanding to teach that to someone else? So before we run through these skills, I just want to point out that there are lots of different places where mentorship happens. Because after I give a talk like this, someone always comes and asks me for an opportunity. So here they are. So at work, you might have an informal or a formal mentorship program. We actually do this at Envato, and I have 2 little mentees at the moment. And that comes about just because usually someone says to their manager, oh, I'm feeling like I'm missing skills in this particular thing. And the manager goes, great, well, I probably can't help you, but maybe we could find someone who can. And bam, suddenly I'm getting a DM and now I have a mentee. So at the moment I'm mentoring someone on how to speak at conferences. So give me some good feedback so I can go back into that next mentoring session with some confidence, please. And also someone wants to upskill their knowledge of Ruby on Rails. And so very different things. I'm not an expert in either of those things, but I know how to be a good mentor. So if you are at work and there's something that you want to learn, or maybe you see someone has a knowledge gap, or maybe an EM has mentioned to you, or sorry, an engineering manager has mentioned to you, hey, do you think you'd be able to help this person with this particular thing? That's an opportunity to actually create some kind of system around it and create some more formalized mentoring. There's also, you could pair with other less experienced developers on your team, which I really hope that you already do. So if someone's stuck with something, you can have a pairing session with them to work it out. Onboarding new team members is the best opportunity because someone who's brand new to the team doesn't know what they're doing and doesn't know all the systems they need. So this is a really great opportunity to practice mentoring. And you could also give team presentations. So maybe you have a company that is like lunch and learns, or maybe you've just created a really complicated PR. So instead of just putting the PR up and hoping for the best, maybe you could run a presentation of actually running people through that PR. So that's at work. There's also community opportunities to be a mentor. So for example, you could speak at meetups or conferences. This feels like a good enough example of that. You could also tutor at public coding workshops, or you could tutor or teach at things like boot camps. So off the top of my head, I came up with a list of places like that do that. So SheCodes, General Assembly, Code Camp, Codemaster Institute. I think all of those places have opportunities in Perth to actually mentor. SheCodes in particular, they're like literally around the corner. Go and ask them when their next workshop is, because they're always looking for mentors. Can you tell I used to work there? I'm just slightly biased. So there are plenty of opportunities to be a mentor. Saying, oh, I haven't had the opportunity is not good enough. There are opportunities all around you. So what is your actual role as a mentor? Like, what is your job as a mentor? Your job is to help a mentee discover ideas and solve problems for themselves. So in other words, it's not your job to provide solutions. That's not useful. Your job is to help somebody else to figure out what problems they're actually facing and then figure out how to solve those problems. So if you're a visual person, this is what I don't want you to do. So sometimes someone needs help with something. Maybe they've got a bug and they can't get their code running or whatever. You provide a solution, the code is running, and you pat yourself on the back and go, sweet, I solved the problem. I mean, great, but you actually didn't really help anyone. You solved this one particular problem, but did you give them the skills to be able to figure out how to solve it next time? I don't think so. Did you get anything out of that interaction? Like, did you learn how this person learns, and so how you might better come at them with solving a problem next time? I don't think so. In general, this is a really quick fix, and it helps no one in the long run. So I'm going to show you instead a flowchart of what I use to mentor other people. And it's a little bit intimidating, but it's okay, we're going to walk through it. I did my best. So this is what happens whenever someone at work comes to me with a problem that they would like help with. So they come to me, they're confused about a particular concept or task. So we're going to, I can do this. We're going to start up here. So they come to me confused about a particular concept or task. So the very first thing that I'm going to do, I can do this, is I'm not going to grab their laptop and start digging and figure out what's going on. I'm going to ask them some clarifying questions. And the reason I'm going to do that is because quite often when I'm mentoring, there's a couple of things that happen. Someone might use a bunch of really fancy terminology, but it turns out that they actually don't know what those words meant, and it's impressive that they managed to get the sentence together. It would be really easy to fall for that and think that that means that they know what they're talking about. And I'm not trying to shame the person in this situation, because great, they used a bunch of really cool terminology. What I'm trying to figure out is how far back do I need to go to actually explain things. So if they've picked up a word, but they've used it in the wrong context, you need to help them with that. You need to solve that so they don't do that again. Or the other thing that can happen is someone has the concept figured out, but they don't have the words to describe it. So in this case, they know the concept, they don't know the terminology to use, which makes it really hard to actually form a question. So in that case, you're going to ask them some more clarifying questions to figure out which of those categories does this person fit into, if either of them, and you're going to work out, what are they actually asking me? What do they need help with? And your job, and actually this is something that, again, an apprentice said to me a couple of weeks ago, is it's a real skill to meet someone at the level that they are at. Just because you feel super confident in this particular concept, it doesn't mean that you get to go on a rant about how this thing works. Your job is to figure out what this person is actually asking and then give them the answer appropriate to their level. And even if you're like itching to tell them more and tell them about the founder who wrote this thing and then the history of, oh, and then this happened and then we merged this and then version 12 with blah, 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 not useful. Your job is to match the level that they're at and give them the exact amount of information that they need. Which leads us to the next step. So I want you to provide an explanation. So once you've figured out what they're actually asking you, because you've asked those clarifying questions, you're going to provide an explanation. And if you don't know the answer to the question, you're not going to act with confidence and just give them an explanation. You're going to Google it with them. And together you're going to build an explanation, and you're going to try and work out how to actually explain the thing that they don't understand. And I do this all the time. I say, I have no idea what you're talking about, but the internet does. And so we go and we look up some blog posts or find some YouTube videos, we learn about it together, and then we unpack it together. So once you've done that, you're then going to confirm, you're going to confirm understanding. So you're not just going to go and read blog posts, figure it out, give a monologue, assume they understood, and then carry on. You're going to ask them some more questions. You're going to make sure they actually understood what you just unpacked. And quite often, I'll ask them the exact same question that they came to me with. And if they can answer it confidently, sweet, I've done my job. They now understand this thing. But if they can mostly pull an answer together, but maybe they still use some wrong terminology, maybe they've forgotten a word, maybe it doesn't actually quite make sense in this particular context, in other words, they're still confused, then you're going to ask them some more questions. You're going to try and figure out where are they at now, and what blanks do I need to fill in now. And you might go through this process many times. So you ask a question, you give an explanation, you'll confirm the understanding, they're still confused, so you're going to go ask questions again. And that's where that skill of being able to explain something in multiple different ways comes in, because you can't just give an explanation, confirm understanding, find out they're still confused, and give the exact same explanation and expect there to be a different result. It's literally the definition of insanity. So you're going to practice giving a different kind of explanation instead. So once you've finally confirmed their understanding, and I'd like to point out that even though I've written make sense there, you're going to confirm their understanding by doing anything except asking, does that make sense? Because chances are the person's just going to say yes, because that feels like how you're meant to answer that question. Not useful. So you can ask them a bunch of other questions and determine for yourself whether that seems to have made sense for them. And then you're going to move on to actually solving the problem, if there is one. Because at this point, they might have a solution. Just the explanation that you've given might have given them enough information to go with, so they have a solution, so they need to move on. Otherwise, if they don't have a solution, now you're going to guide them to one. And again, you might be pulling out blog posts, you might be finding other files in the repo to share them to, but you're going to help them figure out a potential solution. You're not going to give it to them, you're going to have chats, you're going to have brainstorms, you're going to help them figure it out for themselves. But before you leave them, you're going to confirm their understanding again. You're going to make sure that they understand what they actually need to do now to solve that problem. So they might even tell you the exact same thing that you just told them, but there might be a little bit more confidence in their voice. So you're going to say, I'm going to go look at this particular repo, I'm going to find this example because I know that we did it here, and I'm going to look at this PR that put it up to see the notes. So they might give you a full explanation. Great, that means they've understood. If they're still a bit hazy, they're not okay to be left alone yet, because you're just going to leave them in a state of confusion, which is not what you want to do. So you might go through this cycle over and over again as well. So finally, once they have a solution and they feel confident, you're going to time box them. So depending on the complexity of the task that you're giving them, that time box could be, I'm going to come back to you in 10 minutes. It could be, I'm going to ask you, tomorrow how that thing went. So you're just going to judge it for yourself to see how complex the thing is. So for example, a couple of weeks ago, I was paired with someone who was stuck on something to do with our build pipeline. And as I went through this process, it probably took me longer than it should have, but as we went through this process, I realized, this person actually doesn't know where BuildKite fits in and how that connects to GitHub and how these things talk to each other. So I'm going to give her 10 minutes. I'm going to say, I need you to go do some reading on this particular thing. Here's the page of the docs I'd suggest you read. In 10 minutes, I'm going to come back, and we're just going to see how you're going. In 10 minutes, and she could explain it. She had that aha moment, everything sunk in, she now understood, which is great. It means that we could repeat this process all over again. So you're going to time box a task. So for me, that was go read these docs. Then once you've done that and you've checked in with them, you're now going to consider frustration versus fun. Is this person still having fun? Kat was having the best time because she's really into infrastructure, and having that aha moment was great for her. So she was ready to just ask the next question, be guided to a solution, and then carry on. Time box another 20 minutes, move on. If the person is no longer having fun, so they're really frustrated and they're feeling kind of dumb, they felt like they haven't made progress, well then you're not just going to put them into this loop of continuing to feel dumb. You're going to go back to the very beginning, you're going to ask them more questions, because maybe you didn't nail it the first time. Maybe they didn't actually know what they needed to ask the first time. So you're going to go back through it all over again, but this time you're going to give some more hints. You're going to give them a little bit more clues. you're going to give them the specific section of the docs, the specific line in the file, the specific part of that PR or whatever you're sharing with them. You're going to give them more clues, and you're going to go through the process again. If you do, and you get to the end and the person is now just properly upset and ready to throw their laptop out the window, because we have all been there, then you're just going to give them the solution. And I'm going to tell you that sometimes, even though I said don't do this, sometimes you just have to give them the solution. It's not their day. It's Friday afternoon and they're really tired because learning how to do these things is really complicated. That's totally fine. The chances are they have learned something from this process, but they're now fatigued of learning new things, and you need to help them out a little bit more. But now you've both built this relationship and understand this process of how you're supposed, or what is a useful way to help someone. So you're still going to try it again next time. And chances are they're going to be a bit fresher. They're going to come in knowing you're about to ask me a bunch of questions. So I've got the answers to those questions ready, which an apprentice surprised me with because she did that to me a couple of weeks ago. So this process works until someone's really frustrated, in which case it's totally fine. Just give them the answer. Just next time, you'll try again. We've all been in that situation where, for me, it's Monday mornings. I don't know, my brain's not on. Like, I'm not learning anything. So just give me the answer. And while you're going through this process, there's a couple of things that I want you to remember. So I want you to remember to have compassion. The earlier someone is in their career, the easier it is to suffer with the, oh, I'm so dumb, and everybody else knows more than me. And the longer you've been in your career, probably the more that you've forgotten that this was you too. Like, for example, do you remember what it was like navigating your code editor for the first time you opened a repository with thousands of files in it? Probably not. But to someone who's just done that for the first time, that is so hard. Even if they've done a boot camp and they've learned how to use this particular framework, that is not the same when there are thousands of files in there instead of 20. It's really hard navigating a code editor. So while you're explaining perhaps a really technical concept, remember the earlier someone is in their career, just the harder they're going to struggle, just because it's not muscle memory to use those shortcuts to jump between files. That hasn't been developed yet, depending on the level that they're at. So while you're mentoring someone, have compassion. Really think about where they are in their career and what they're good at and what they still need help with, and adjust the language that you use and the pace that you go at to suit them. I also want you to talk about your failures. This is really important because it's really easy to feel like, oh, I messed up and I don't want to be judged, so I'm going to hide it and I'm not going to tell anyone. No, we don't want that. That's how prod gets broken and everyone feels confused. So I want you to talk about your failures. I broke prod a few weeks ago, and I broke it in a very bad way because we have this little toast that comes up in the corner, and when you click it, you go to a site where people sign up and actually give us money, so Envato actually makes money from it. And I accidentally got rid of the toast, and no one noticed, and that was bad. So instead of trying to bury that and think, oh, just fix this, I went to the team like, hey team, I messed up, lol, 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 lol. And so we fixed it, right? But then what was important about that process is that I then went to the apprentices like, oh, guess what I did yesterday? I really messed up. And so we actually did our own little post-mortem about, oh, what went wrong? And how about we dig through the code and figure out how that happened? And let's talk about the process that we went through to discover that this thing was actually an issue. By the way, when you're doing something like that, check that it actually works on prod, because no one did and no one noticed. So talk about your failures with them. Quite often, they're going to ask you probing questions that are going to make you realize, yeah, maybe we should adjust our process. Maybe I should have checked prod when I deployed this thing rather than thinking prod and staging were going to be the same state, because that's ridiculous. They're never the same state. Oh, yeah, it was a whole problem. It was a whole thing. Staging was this is the state that I was in that day when I broke that thing. It was not a fun day. I also want you to remember to provide meaningful work with meaningless deadlines. And this is something that I think we do really well at Envato with our apprentices. So we actually sit on delivery teams. We spend about 6 weeks on a team and then we hop around. And while we're on those delivery teams, our apprentices are given real cards that do contribute to the product, that actually make a difference. But they're given cards specifically that aren't urgent. They have absolutely no deadline attached. In fact, the earlier they are on in their apprenticeship, the more likely that in their first 6 weeks, they will not finish that card. And instead, our goal is to go on tangents, learn a bunch of stuff in the process, and make sure we do a really good handover with the team when we leave the team. And what that ends up doing is it just takes away the pressure. There's no like, oh, I need to learn this thing, but this thing's due next week, so Hayley, can you just tell us so we can feel like we're making progress? It takes all of that away. But at the same time, they get to feel like they're actually making a difference on the product that they're working on. So meaningful work, meaningless deadlines is probably, if you take one thing away, this should be it. This makes a significant difference when you're onboarding someone new to your team. And finally, I'd also like you to remember to leave your ego at the door. Just because you're a contributor to Django doesn't mean that you need to throw your weight around and say, oh, but I wrote it, so I know that it works this way, so you need to do it this way. Like in a mentoring session, totally not useful, totally not encouraging, totally not friendly. So leave your ego at the door. It doesn't matter how much experience you have. When you're mentoring someone, you're focused on them. You're not focused on your experience, you're focused on them and what they need to learn. So we've talked about how mentoring can help you to be a better dev. We've talked about how it can help you to be an effective mentor. And now I want us to talk about how can you actually use all these skills to make a difference in our industry. So I would like to point out that only training those that are already in engineering doesn't really help with our diversity issue. Like if you look around this room, how many women in here and how many dudes are here? Like if you only train the cohort of people in this room, are we helping to produce more role models or improve the diversity in our industry? No. We are doing a great thing because we're helping each other and we're helping build our community to upskill, and that's fantastic, but you're not helping with diversity. So I want you to use these skills to actually shift the needle and get some more interesting and different teams built in our industry. So I want you to consider taking on career changes for diversity of thought and experience. And what I mean by this is, so many places go to like a university for their main recruitment drive. If you look at the number of people who are in university or TAFE or even boot camps, they are predominantly men. This is not a secret. So if that is where you're primarily going to recruit, then you are primarily attempting to recruit men and you are leaving women behind. So I want you to consider taking on career changes. People who have taught themselves at home and maybe done a few workshops, and they're feeling confident and they're feeling like they're ready to learn. And you might think, oh, but do they have the experience? They haven't done this training. If someone is prepared to change careers, I can guarantee you they are prepared to learn and they're going to be dedicated. They will be a great person to hire and train yourself. I'd also like you to consider upskilling those that are gender diverse to create more role models. And how might you do that? So at Envato, we like to say our apprentice program isn't equal, but it is fair. And we say that because our apprentice program actually only takes on people who identify as women. We do not take cis men into the apprentice program. And at first thought, and I bet someone in here is really outraged about that right now. So yes, you are right, it is not equal. But quite often someone says, well, that's not fair. And what I would like to point out to you is that if you go to university or TAFE or a boot camp, you'll see plenty of men and you'll see hardly any women. Men have every opportunity to get into this industry. It is much harder to be a woman in this industry. It is much harder to break into this industry. It is much harder to get over your imposter syndrome in this industry. It is much harder to find a role model in this industry. And if you would like to argue with me on that later, I am more than happy to, because this rant could go on a lot longer than this one slide. So I would like you to consider, when you go and hire someone who's new to this industry, could you be more diverse in your hiring practices? Could you maybe remove names from CVs, for example, and just take out, the burden of, oh, I've seen their name, so I know this person's a woman, I know this person's a man, and just hire on, the experience and what they bring to the team and how willing they are to learn, rather than going to your universities and going to your TAFEs and going to your boot camps, unless it's she codes, because that's for women, because then you've got a problem in your hiring pipeline already. And quickly, I'd also like us to run through just what are the other benefits of upskilling internally. You can teach people the habits you want, especially if you're hiring someone and this is their very first role in tech. If you hire a senior, that person's coming with opinions, and that person's coming with biases. I don't like that tech. I live in the Google space. Oh, you use Teams? I'll never work for you. Or, oh, I'm a React person. I couldn't possibly, we're not going to do this new project in Vue because we like React. A senior has opinions. A junior doesn't. A junior's going to hear that you love React and think, yeah, I love React too. So teach, the more junior you hire, the more opportunity you've got to teach people the habits that you want them to have. Which sounds really evil, but it's really good for your company. It also, I want you to think of it as an investment. So this is an opportunity to give your reputation a boost. Within Envato, our apprentice program is really well recognized, and people are excited about our apprentice program because the apprentices that we create, they are exceptional developers. They do extremely well at Envato, and it generally just kind of helps boost just the morale around the company. Whenever we get new apprentices in, everybody's we're a virtual community, but somehow everyone's kind of a bit oh my God, the apprentices are starting today, or apprentice graduation, will they come into my team? It's actually been really great for the company. And as a result, we also get longer tenures. The apprentices that we train in Envato stay with us for a really long time, which is awesome. But also a lot of people at Envato, they talk about when we ask them, because I'm kind of nosy, I ask people, why do you like Envato, to the other people I work with? And a lot of people mention the apprentice program and mention we're actually walking the walk of trying to improve the diversity in our industry. We're actually taking 2 apprentices, assigning them a developer mentor and training them for 9 months is a huge investment. And people recognize that within our company. So, I feel like I should have had some water at some point during that talk. Okay, we talked about my career journey, how did teaching help me to be a better dev, effective mentorship, and improving diversity in our industry. I really hope that this has at least inspired you to maybe think about how can you be a better mentor, or what can you take back to your team. And maybe, you could even harass the senior leaders in your team. Hayley said it's really great to hire juniors who don't just all look the same as everybody in our team. Maybe we should actually do that. That would be really awesome if you actually considered that. So thank you so much for spending time with me today. Chuck me a follow on Twitter if you'd like to chat about anything in these slides. Don't check out my blog because I broke it this week and I don't know how to fix it. And please leave me some feedback on the DDD website. That would be really great. So thank you, everybody.